Welcome to the SNI Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Latomsky. With deep roots in the Canadian regulatory landscape for the last 18 years, SNI has helped hundreds of companies get on the shelf quickly and compliantly so that they can sell more and grow their brands. On this show, you'll hear stories from SNI's clients, plus the team's insights on how to overcome your biggest compliance issues and create a standout brand in the food and natural wellness space. The SNI Podcast is your source for market compliance. Now, on to the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I'm joined by two of SNI's teammates here. They're team members, getting two different perspectives on the company as well as the types of jobs within the company. So the first being a perspective from SNI's longest serving team member, Marcel Fisette, the Director of Creative Services here at SNI. You've been with the company since 2004, since the company started.
That's correct. Yes.
First employee.
Second employee. Bernie would be the founder is number one. I'm number two.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get to that in a second.
All
and
right.
The second perspective we have is from Erin Taraborrelli, the Director of Regulatory Affairs here at SNI. And you've been with the company. You're the newest employee. You've been with the company since January, right? So 3 months?
That's right. Exactly. Yep.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks.
Marcel, let's start with you. I want to know that story. 19 years at one company is pretty rare, especially for someone your age. Tell me how that started, because that must have been a leap of faith, hey, to join a startup being a second employee.
Yeah. Well, that's very kind of my age. I mean, but so Bernie and I worked together in a previous life at another sports supplement importation company and distributor. Prior to the inception of Source Nutraceutical. That company moved on to relocate, but Bernie and I decided to stay in Winnipeg at the time. And Bernie was going to do some consulting on his own. And he had one client in particular that needed a large volume of packaging artwork created. And I was working at another, in an advertising department at another retail chain. And I was doing some freelance for him. And my wife and I just had our first kid at the time. And he said, Marcel, would you like to do some freelance for me? And I said, absolutely, sure. We had a pre-existing relationship, so we knew how each other worked and our styles, and he knew what to expect. And he needed someone that was bilingual as well, because the packaging was for the Canadian market, needing 2 languages. So that always helps. During that process, it became more and more busy. And then finally he said, listen, Marcel, I have an opportunity for you. Would you like to come to Source Nutraceutical full time? And I said, sure, pending one condition, as long as you can guarantee me income for 1 year, like a 1-year contract.
Yeah, you had a kid.
I had a kid. Yeah. Here we are 19 years later. And, lots have happened over the last 19 years. But back then, it was him and I. We would live in the same neighborhood. I would walk or ride my bike or drive to his house. We worked in one of his spare bedrooms until we expanded into his basement, which was like our first big expansion. And there we were up to 4 employees there. And I think his wife was kind of like tired of having a driveway full of cars every day.
Get out of the house.
Yeah. So then we found an actual office space. So
amazing.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun.
And over those 19 years, I could imagine your roles probably evolved many times. Mm-hmm. How has it evolved? And more importantly, what's kept it interesting for you?
Well, one thing about Source Nutraceutical and the creative services department in particular is that we have a lot of long-standing employees, myself included, and the team has evolved as well. So what's happened there is that we've not only done packaging compliance, but we've also pivoted to do new media. We've done a lot of advertising, branding development, and those changes in all the creative services area has kept it interesting for myself and our creative services team. So without that team, we wouldn't be here for sure. I mean, it was a really big evolution for all of us. And
sure.
As we evolved, processes evolved, regulations evolved, and having that expertise and experience over those years has just always been really, really helpful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Erin, let's hear your story. So what's sort of your educational background, and what stepping stones did you take to ultimately land you here at SNI?
All right. Well, a really long time ago, I graduated from University of Guelph here, haven't left. And I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Nutritional and Nutraceutical Science. And that was just really when nutraceuticals really started becoming popular. And I was really interested in that field. Though I had never heard of regulatory affairs, even at the point I graduated. But shortly after, strangely enough, my experience started in sports nutrition as well. So I didn't know that we had that in common, Marcel. But I accepted a position at a sports nutritional supplement company that is here in Toronto, but it did most of its business in the U.S. So I started out being a nutrition label specialist, their only one, their first one, and through a lot of self-teaching, learning regulations, reading regulations, long hours. I eventually started the regulatory affairs department at that company. So that was really interesting. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. So I've stayed there for 10 years. And then I actually moved into consulting. So I really liked consulting because I was able to help a lot more companies reach their goals, become compliant. I learned a lot of different areas, like different sectors, instead of just being in supplements, in natural health products and dietary supplements. I learned a lot more food, every different type of food that you can imagine. And then I joined SNI 3 months ago. So I get to continue educating and helping clients reach their goals in both Canada regulations and US regulations, where I had my start.
That's excellent. So talking about educating clients, there's a lot of people listening who may have never heard of regulatory affairs.
Yep.
What is that?
So regulatory affairs is the industry that oversees how regulated products like foods, supplements, cosmetics, drugs, medical devices are developed, manufactured, and labeled according to our regulated standards. So in Canada, Health Canada regulates a lot of those products, or all those products, and they have standards that you need to meet. In the US is FDA, USDA, FTC. And as consumers, we have no idea how many different types of regulations actually touch the products that we use and consume every single day. For example, for foods, the ingredients that go into the product, the nutrition information that's on the label, the allergen label or allergen declaration that's in your ingredient list. For supplements, that might include the product license application that you need to file with Health Canada to actually sell in Canada. For pharmaceuticals, it can include clinical trials that you need or you want to run to be able to sell your product, to ensure that it's safe and that it's effective. So basically, regulatory affairs focuses on consumer safety to make sure that, or protection, consumer protection, to make sure that the products that we use every day are safe and effective and not misleading.
That makes sense. So, and I don't mean this question to sound judgmental, but why are you interested in that? Because you have to have a love for it, clearly, with something so technical, to be as involved with it as you are. So what about it, excites you?
It takes a real nerd to be excited about regulatory affairs.
I didn't want to say it.
That's all right. I'm a self-nerd. But yeah, I really love that you really are supporting so many parts of society in regulatory affairs. For example, we support industry by helping them get to market with a compliant and safe product. We help interpret the regulations for industry. We help consumers by ensuring that the products that we buy all the time are safe, effective, and not misleading. And we even help government by ensuring that the laws and regulations that they are releasing, that they are publishing, are interpreted correctly by industry. So I like that we kind of help all parts of society that way. And I like the attention to detail. I like those little strange regulations that pop up every now and again.
Yeah, keeps it interesting for sure.
Okay.
So SNI always talks about helping your clients get to market quickly and compliantly. So Erin, you want to start walking through that process. What does that involve when a client comes to you guys looking for that support? How do you go about managing that?
So there are so many variations and possibilities of pathways depending on the specific type of product and market you're looking to enter. But we always say a formulation review is really the best place to start. You need to assess the product. Like, what is it? Is it a food, a dietary supplement, a cosmetic? The ingredients, the claims, they can all govern what classification that product would need to be. And even if you know the classification in one market, it may not be the same in another market that you're trying to enter. But checking that there is a viable pathway with the formulation that you've created is a great place to start, because if there's not a viable pathway, then you may need to go back to the formula.
And then interrupt for 1 second. Yeah, what does that mean by pathway?
Sure, the way that you need to get to market compliantly. So sometimes you may need to provide an application to Health Canada to actually sell your product. Sometimes you don't need to. So for many foods, you can actually just make sure that you are compliant, formulating your product compliantly, and then developing a label that meets the regulation, and then you can go straight to market. But some products need clinical trials, they need applications. So depending on the type of product it is, it might have a different path.
So how does that then translate into packaging, Marcel? How does that affect you?
Packaging plays a huge role. It would be that it has to meet compliance requirements, for one thing. It has to meet the brand language of the product itself, and it has to meet sustainability requirements, whether it's logistical requirements as well, recycling and all that kind of stuff as well. And so there's lots of different aspects to packaging that you have to consider when creating the product. One of the major things is that in Canada in particular is the dual language requirement, as everyone or most people know, with the dual language. And a lot of our customers come from other markets. A lot of them are from the US, where there's only a one language requirement. So when they come into Canada to launch their product in Canada, they are greeted with a dual language requirement on the packaging, but then the branding of that packaging was designed without that often considered. So our design team has a lot of experience in implementing dual language requirements and a lot of tricks that we can do from a graphic design perspective in order to fit twice the copy or twice the requirements on the same available real estate. They do that every day, and often, or almost always, it meets the brand language requirements without still taking into consideration the brand itself.
For sure.
Yeah. The brand integrity is what I mean. Yeah.
Excellent. So Erin, obviously on the regulatory affairs side, you're really influencing then the design and working closely with Marcel's team. Can you talk a little bit about how you have that influence with the design and how your teams kind of work together to ultimately get that product to market?
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of regulations that actually touch on the formatting of the labels beyond just the content of the labels. So for example, for foods going into the US market, there are regulations that say that the nutrition facts panel, the ingredient list, and the company name and address all have to be together with no intervening material on the panel that's to the right of the front panel. And in Canada, even the spacing between lines of text in the ingredients is regulated. Oh, yes. And these specific formatting and labeling regulations, you really need to know all those little details to be able to get past the border, going Canada, US or US to Canada. That is something that's easily seen by a regulator at the border to identify that the label might not be compliant. And working with a creative team that knows all of these little specific regulations, like Marcel's team, it can save so much time and so many headaches, because you're not your graphic designers already know these regulations while they're making the labels. So it really helps.
Yeah. Just to add to that too, often brands have their own in-house or agencies that they work with when they did the initial brand development. And we find having an end-to-end solution with SNI, being the whole regulatory compliance pathway to market, translation, and graphic design, is a much quicker speed to market strategy, as opposed to our regulatory team working with an outside agency or another brand's in-house creative team. Very often those in-house creative teams just aren't familiar with the, little idiosyncrasies of the line spacing, line weight, format, et cetera, as Erin just talked about. So the revision cycles are greatly reduced if SNI is able to do it from end to end. We have a very robust quality control process. And like I said, our designers here, we're all very familiar with the requirements, and working in the same building as the regulatory team just makes everything smoother.
Exactly. You guys aren't siloed anymore.
That's right.
You're
Exactly.
more collaborative with the approach.
Bingo.
Regulations changes. That's also adds another huge factor when clients come to you, trying to stay on top of those changing regulations. Erin, can you talk a little bit about what typically happens with changing regulations? Like, is it immediate? Or are you guys scrambling to get product off the shelf and repackaged, or is it more gradual? And how do you sort of stay on top of those?
Sure. The regulations are not stagnant. They do change, but it is a gradual change, usually with plenty of notice and an adjustment period for industry. For example, the supplemented food regulations came into effect last summer. Those were 10 years in the making. So we knew they were coming. We had a heads up. A year before that, we had a general idea of what they were going to look like. And then it was just the details that came out last year. So we kind of see it coming from a long time away. And there have been substantial labeling updates for both Canada and the US in the food space as well, of course, with the changes to the nutrition facts table and panel on both sides of the border. But those happened over a span of 5-7 years, thanks also to COVID. But now Canada is adapting the natural health product labeling regulations to include a product facts that will look very familiar to consumers that are used to seeing that in the drug facts and the nutrition facts segments as well. But those have a compliance deadline of between 3 and 6 years, depending on whether your product was already in the market when the regulations were updated. So you can kind of see that there is a lot of advance notice to industry. And keeping close contact with industry and government means that we see these changes coming from a mile away and have insight at every step of the process and understand the impact that the changes will have to our clients. And we can help our clients plan and manage those changes. Because some of our clients have a great deal of SKUs that they will need to adapt. So even those 3 years can feel very quick, but we can help plan for our clients and help them move over to the new regulations at every step.
If I could just also add, often we'll suggest that brands implement new regulations ahead of time or immediately, because then it sets their brand apart by implementing these regulations, because they are basically there for consumer awareness and making sure that the claims are displayed in the correct way. So being first to market with implementation of newly updated regulations often is a benefit for brands.
Mm-hmm. Less headaches, less scrambling also.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they don't have to rush it at the end when there's like a deadline, or they're able to kind of set themselves apart in that way. So it gives the impression of innovation. And
for sure. So what challenges do your team usually run into with these changing regulations? What are you seeing more commonly that you have to navigate?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, having the regulatory team working so closely with us, we do see them, as Erin put it, from a mile away, which is really great. We have a very sophisticated quality control process, as I mentioned. So all those SOPs are reviewed and maintained and updated as the regulations do evolve. And those SOPs include checklists to help aid our designers to ensure that their regulations are done correctly. So if there's a new nutrition facts panel for supplemented foods, or just more recently, the updated nutrition facts table on food products and the way formatting of ingredient listings is done. All of our processes have been updated to be current, and we have like our designers are all very familiar with those processes. So the challenges are there definitely, but the systems that we have in place with our SOPs and checklists and quality control allow us to kind of absorb those changes and implement them, correctly and with relative ease.
Yeah.
And again, with our lots of experience and our kind of senior design team that's experienced a lot of things, these changes aren't that out of their regular day-to-day.
Yeah.
So they're familiar with them.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, with the collaborative approach with the regulatory affairs team, I could see that being a huge benefit for your clients, having both the teams as well as that clinical research team under one house.
Yeah. And often these brands, when they see how we've implemented the requirements and their packaging was a single language US packaging, for example, and then we implemented a dual language and all the different regulatory requirements, and it still meets their brand integrity, they're always very pleased with, oh, this actually doesn't look too bad. I thought there would be no way we could fit all this stuff on here. And so we feel that the feedback that we get from brands is positive in that sense.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, to switch it up and put you on the spot, Erin, give me a fun fact about regulatory affairs.
All right. Fun regulatory affairs doesn't often happen in the same sentence. So this year we are celebrating the 20th year anniversary of Canada's nutrition facts tables, which is a bit hard to believe. Prior to 2003, it was completely voluntary to provide any nutrition information on a food product label.
Really?
And if you wanted to, there was no regulated format that you needed to follow. And it's crazy to me to think of how far we've come with understanding of how important it is to provide information to consumers about the food that they're going to eat. So 20 years ago was not that long ago when you're 40 something. So it's crazy to think about the time before that where you may not have known anything about the food nutrition profile that you're about to eat.
Yeah, that is crazy. I did not realize it was 20 years ago. Yeah. You didn't have to put anything on. That's the Wild West.
Back then, I remember that when they implemented it, Health Canada actually had interactive workshops in major centers in Canada. And the one in Winnipeg here was hosted not far from here, actually. And I remember Bernie and I and another designer going to that event and going like, how are we going to implement this on packaging? And how are we going to do it? But, here we are. Everyone's got it. It's all in the packaging now. And now we've actually gone through a second iteration of that nutrition facts table. And even those are becoming they have to be commonplace right now. So it's interesting how they've evolved.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And Marcel, do you have any tips for anyone listening on packaging design or anything that you want to share with any of the viewers today?
Yeah. Well, a tip on packaging.
There's probably lots.
Well, sure. I mean, always consider your audience, always consider current trends. Often less is more. Having a principal display panel full of credentials and claims and health claims, often one or two stronger claims carries more weight than 8 or 9 kind of softer claims. Not to mention the dual language requirements. It makes it very difficult to focus on that because then there's just too much happening there. You don't want to have a big wall of copy. Simple design often is best. And always consider sustainability of packaging materials as well.
I could see that being really hard for clients to narrow down to one message, one claim. Right?
Yeah.
Used to, I was in the agency world. And we used to have a saying, if you throw a bunch of oranges, how many are you going to catch? Maybe one, if you're lucky, or none.
Yeah.
Right. If you throw one orange, you're going to catch it almost 100% of the time.
That's a great analogy.
Sift through the message.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both, Erin and Marcel, for joining me here today. That was a great conversation.
Thank you.
And everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the SNI Podcast. To learn more about SNI and receive even more resources to help you reach your business goals, including information on regulatory compliance, clinical trials, and creative solutions for the natural health and food industries, follow us at Source Nutraceutical Inc. on LinkedIn. You can also visit our website at sourcenutra.com. Thanks again and see you next time.